Thank you. Good to be back. Thanks so much. Hello. How are you doing? Good to see you. Nice dress. You look pretty. What? Okay. Thanks for coming. Well, thank you all for being here. I didn't have to view what you just viewed, so I'm glad I didn't. But I think that we need to have truth prevail. And so today we're going to be exposing, we've already exposed with that video, I think, this idea of a book ban in Florida, that somehow they don't want books in the library. That's a hoax. And that's really a nasty hoax, because it's a hoax in service of trying to pollute and sexualize our children. We'll also talk about the Black History hoax, the idea that somehow we're not teaching about that, and not teaching about things like racial discrimination. So we're going to go through all of that. We've got some great folks here with us, and I want to recognize them. We have Manny Diaz, who's our Department of Education Commissioner in the state of Florida. Tia Bess from Northeast Florida. We have Julie Gebhards, a parent from here in Hillsborough County. From the school board here, Dr. Stacy Hahn, welcome. And her fellow school board member from the other side of the state in Broward, and I don't know who has it more difficult wading through those on those boards, but Tori Alston from Broward County. And then we have from the Central Florida Urban League, Glenn Gilzine. So thank you for coming. So we have seen over many weeks. So first of all, I think that video, I think some of the news had to cut the feed because it's graphic. And we've heard different things put out. There was a Duval County school video where they took a video of empty bookshelves, and they say the state of Florida doesn't want books, they're trying to censor books and all this stuff. Turned out that was a hoax. Turned out that individual who did that in the school system was fired. You've also had other things where they've tried to say that you're not allowed to teach certain basic things that we require. Some of those folks have been put on discipline and will likely lose their jobs. So a lot of that, what's been going on, is an attempt to create a political narrative. And it's a false political narrative, and that's bad enough as it is, I guess. But for me, the important thing is that's a false narrative in service of using our schools for indoctrination rather than education. And we've drawn a very firm line in the sand in Florida about that. We believe in strong, rigorous education. We believe in the rights of parents to be involved in the education of their children, and therefore have enacted curriculum transparency legislation so that the parents know what books are being used in the classroom, what books do their kids have access to, and then they have procedures where they can say, wait a minute, some of the stuff you saw up there, that is pornographic. Why would we have that in a media center with 10-year-old students? It's just wrong. And a lot of parents now have been empowered to make sure that these are appropriate environments. I mean, we have 6, 4, and 2-year-old at home. I just think parents, when they're sending their kids to school, they should not have to worry about this garbage being in the schools. They should just know that you're going to get a good education. We're going to do well to really do the basics and have our kids succeed. That's what they want. They don't want the garbage. And the idea that that's even in there is inappropriate for these young kids. But they are using your tax dollars to put that in. How is that an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars to put that in? So what you've seen is a lot of false narratives put out. And I think, though, there is a concerted effort to bring some of this sexualization into the classroom, particularly in these young grades. I mean, we did do Parents' Rights in Education bill, I think, as many of you know, but even when you're talking about 12, 13-year-olds, to see some of that stuff in there, I think most parents would say absolutely not. Parents can have those discussions when they think it's appropriate with their kid, but to have that is wrong. And we've been very clear about that and how we're gonna handle that. You've also heard some things about the ability or the availability of African American history in Florida. And this grew out of, there was a proposed course that the College Board was sending to different states. It hadn't even been approved yet. And they were soliciting feedback, so it was still in the experimental stages. But our Department of Education said, this is rejected. It clearly goes against our standards about opposing ideological indoctrination. And so we identified the reasons why. So you just tell me whether you think this is something that is appropriate for an African American history course. So this is, they had a thing about queer studies, right? They put that in this course. And this is the quote from one of the readings there, quote, "We have to encourage and develop practices whereby queerness isn't surrender to the status quo of race, class, gender, and sexuality. It means building forms of queerness that reject the given realities of the government and the market." And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, why aren't we talking about Frederick Douglass? You know, why aren't we talking about things that I think can really matter? And so you had a whole bunch of other things. A lot of this was informed by, you know, I would say neo-Marxism, heavy ideological bent. And so that clearly is not something, you know, that we're going to do. But what they would say then is, because this ideologically driven course was not something that met our standards, that somehow Florida prohibited teaching anything about black history. And that is not only not true, Florida law does the opposite. We require that. All the aspects from the colonies all the way to the present. And in fact, since I've been governor, we've expanded that. We did the 1920 Election Day riots. We now have that as being something that has to be discussed, as well as the impact of Jim Crow laws. And so we did a law last year called the Stop Woke Act, Stop Wrongs Against Our Kids and Employees Act, and it was employment protections that if you go to work, that you don't have to sit through a discriminatory training. You have a right to opt out about that. We're litigating that. We'll eventually win on appeal like we normally do. But then also K-12. You know, we're not going to do things like critical race theory. And so a lot of people were happy that we did that. You know, some people tried to criticize. But what we also did in that bill is we required the state of Florida schools to provide instruction about prejudice and racism throughout American history. We actually didn't necessarily have it that strongly in our law prior to this. And so when they say things about, oh, we have to take a book about Hank Aaron out because he talks about suffering racism and that would violate the Stop Woke Act. Understand, they're lying to you. That is not true. And in reality, none of those books had to be removed. It was just it was a fake hoax. But not only would it not be removed or violate standards, it actually tracks with us saying we need to teach these stories. And you know what else we did in the Stop Woke Act? We required teaching stories of inspiration regarding, you know, Floridians, but particularly African Americans. And I think that's a better way to lift people up. Showcase people that have defied the odds and have made great contributions. Don't tell somebody that you're oppressed and you have no chance in life. Why would you work hard if you don't have a chance to be able to do? So it's a positive view. It's showing that people have been able to break down barriers and do great things. And I think that is the way we need to be doing it, rather than always trying to say that the country's bad and all that stuff. Yeah, you got to teach. The facts are the facts, the history's the history. But I think our entire history regarding not just black history, but everything, been a lot of obstacles, been a lot of examples when those ideals weren't always lived up to. But people fought and people were able to ultimately win in the end across a wide variety of these issues. So I think that is a great posture. So here, though, when they talk about the Stop Woke, here's what it actually does prohibit in terms of what we're doing. And if anyone in this room thinks any of this is appropriate, then raise your hand and let's have this debate right here. So what the Stop Woke Act says is, you know, we're not going to teach our kids that they are inherently racist on the basis of their race or color or natural origin. Does anyone think the babies are born racist? I don't think so. I think they're told either to respect people or not, and that's how you end up with this. The other thing we say is in the law, that we are not going to teach that any one race is inherently superior to another race. Is that something that we want to be teaching our kids? I don't think so. We also say that, of course, I think everyone has to agree with this, it's wrong for discrimination on the basis of race, color, natural origin, etc. Also say in the Stop Woke Act that it is wrong to teach that concepts like merit and hard work are basically racist concepts. In reality, we believe merit and hard work are important so that people are able to pursue happiness. The fifth one, not allowed to impose responsibility for the past actions of members of the same racial group. So you have somebody in a classroom now, go back 200 years, someone may look like them. They are not responsible, some first grader sitting in the classroom for that. And then finally, no classroom instruction on collective guilt for acts committed in the past. It's wrong to identify somebody who's just a young kid going to school and saying they're guilty of things they had nothing to do with. So I don't think any of that, honestly, is that controversial. I think that that does prevent some of the ideology from getting in, which is really what we're trying to do. But on its face, I would very, very much doubt that you would find very many people who could stand up and make a case. But that's why you have things like this hoax, because they don't want to argue on the merits. And so they want to have this stuff with this AP course that has a lot of the ideology. That's what they want to have in there. But they don't want to have to argue all this on the merits. They want to be able to say, oh, no, Florida's not allowing to teach Black history, all this. They want to try to do that because they think they're on better ground. Well, they're lying, and so that's not really good ground to be on, but they can't defend their positions on the merits, and so that's why you have this situation. You also have, in terms of the pornographic material, there were reports saying, oh, teachers are so worried, they may end up being charged with a third-degree felony for having books in their classroom. And just understand, that has nothing to do with the Stop Woke Act, has nothing to do with anything we've done since. There is just a long-standing Florida law, has nothing to do with even schools versus not schools. Long-standing Florida law says that it's unlawful for adults to provide pornography for minors. Does anybody disagree with that? Do we want to be in a situation where, of course not. So when they're citing that law, acting like somehow that's chilling what's going on in the library, it's been the law for a long time. I don't think it's ever been appropriate in the history of Florida for adults to be providing pornography to minors. And so that's just, that's the law, that's just, it is what it is. And I think that most people believe that we should keep it that way. They've also tried to say, because they say, oh, they're having to empty the libraries, they're having to cover books because of this and all this other thing. And that's a hoax as well. The Department of Education, when this was started to go out, they said, okay, tell us what you've actually done. Have there been books in a library, classroom, media center, whatever, that were pornographic or that didn't meet state standards? And so they were able to survey all the districts. And, I think a lot of districts never had any problem, right? I mean, I think, but some did. 87% of the books that were identified as school districts as being problematic, they were pornographic, violent, or inappropriate for the grade level in some other manner. That's 87%. That's the bare minimum. And then there was a single school district that had 19 books that had violated the standards, but 94% of those books were removed from media centers. They weren't even in the classroom libraries, which is a good thing to do. And so there have been 23 districts that have had violations, mostly involving pornographic material. But the Department of Education went to, I think it was Duval County, said, hey, wait a minute. You have a beef with Hank Aaron or Roberto Clemente. Where are you getting this? Why can't we learn about that? Where in our law does it say? And of course, they didn't have an answer. I said, no. We're not taking Hank Aaron out. We're not taking Roberto Clemente out. And, look, if our kids only learned about Roberto Clemente and Hank Aaron, I think they'd probably do okay if you just studied their lives. So that's a hoax. That's a false narrative that they're trying to do. And when you were in, I know Duval County, what they did was they kind of waited to even indulge and follow the law for a long time. And so you ended up with a situation where kind of at the end of the period when they said, oh, we got to take all these books and review and all this stuff. And that wasn't necessary the way they did it. They chose to do it, I think, to try to get more maximum impact in terms of what we've been able to accomplish. And so we're going to hear from some other folks who are in this fight. But I think at the end of the day, we need to make sure that our education system is bringing us together. When you start putting that garbage that you saw in there, that is wrong. It's also very, very divisive for the community because parents look at that and they feel like they're sending their kids to a place that is waging war against their own basic values. And we can't have that in the state of Florida. So I'm glad that these folks are working on this. We're happy to be here to be able to say these reports, and we were cataloging them in real time, and you see them even on national television. You know, they will say things like, Florida does not want students to know that there was slavery in the United States, which is just an absolute lie. And are they not doing the 2 minutes of research to go? I mean, you can go on our Department of Education website. They list all this stuff out. Or is it just, you know, the narrative is too good to check and they just want to go ahead and do it? Yeah, they know guys like me will come by and debunk that, and a lot of people will then look and see, okay, well, if it's in Florida law, why is MSNBC or somebody saying this? And some people will then say, yeah, you can't trust them, but very few people trust these people anyways now as it is. And so I think they're preaching to the choir, trying to just get it to take hold amongst a small segment. Then basically they think that mission will have been accomplished. But we're going to fight back. We're going to make sure we're speaking the truth. But the important thing is not that there's, that the hoax is there in and of itself and these are false narratives. I mean, that is important, but it's a false narrative in service of trying to use the schools for an inappropriate purpose. And so ultimately, it's the well-being of our kids that is at stake here. And we're going to continue to put parents and students first. We believe it's important, and we look forward to being able to continue that. Okay, got some more folks here that are going to come up and say a few things. So first, we have Manny Diaz, our Commissioner of Education.
Thank you, Governor. And Governor has shown incredible leadership on education. And all the critics can do is step up and create lies or mislead. One of those, as the Governor mentioned, which was on national media and caught up on Twitter, was Randy Weingarten, the head of the National Teachers Union, claimed on Twitter that Florida had banned To Kill a Mockingbird, only to find out from our response that it's actually on the recommended list of reading for our students in Florida. So you can see where the governor is getting at. They will say we're banning books. The Florida Department of Education does not ban any books. That's a lie. It's never been true. The Department of Education has never instructed any district or school to empty or cover bookshelves, as the governor mentioned. These rumors have been bolstered by fake pictures, videos circulating on social media for clicks. And sadly, some news media have reported the obviously false stories. One of those stories, as the governor mentioned, is the Roberto Clemente book, which is a 40-page picture book about the baseball and the life of Roberto Clemente, really an American hero, not only on the field, but for his endeavors and his humanitarian missions. And we come to find out that Duval County was saying that the book was being banned, and the media was pointing to us, pointing at the governor. So I wrote a letter to the superintendent and said, what are you doing with this book, with Roberto Clemente? This book needs to be put back on the shelves. It's necessary for our students. And magically, the next morning, they said that this book was approved, the Hank Aaron book was approved. So you go to see that all they're doing is try to use this to create lies and attack our governor. What is true, however, is that pornography is absolutely prohibited from our school libraries. You heard that the governor mentioned that is not new. That's been a statute that has been on the books in Florida. And even if this pornography comes in cartoon form, which we probably saw in some of the videos, it's still not okay for our kids. When the fact that the media on TV has to blur out the images or remove them because they might face fines, Who thinks that that would be okay to have at any of our schools, especially our elementary schools? So removing clear instances of pornography and sexually explicit materials, often within arm's reach of our youngest kids, is not book banning. It's protecting our children from harmful materials. The governor gave you the stats from the survey we did at the department. The majority of these things are pornographic, clearly, without a doubt. Any rational person can see that. And the fact that we have hundreds of individuals that have education certificates at our schools, they should be able to see that as well and know what books fall into that category. So education should be focused on academic excellence, the teaching of the truth, not indoctrinating children to become political activists. Our mission is to protect the tried and true historical approach to education that is presenting children with historically accurate content. And they can make their own great decisions and their own perspective. We must use this historical approach that has been part of our country for a very long time, and it's actually what's made our country great. It's served us for generations. Unfortunately, ideology has corrupted much of the education, gotten us off track, and you can see that the critics will continue to point at both book banning and these materials that are clearly pornographic, and also they want to talk about critical race theory and try to make it part of African American history. It's not. Bibliotecas de nuestras escuelas y poder avanzar la educación y no endoctrinar a nuestros hijos y hijas. Así que le doy gracias al gobernador. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership and continuing to have Florida be the education state.
All right. And I think he, one point is when they say if you have some of this material not appropriate for schools, when they try to say that somehow like the book's being quote banned, like adults can do what they want on this stuff. That's available for everybody. Some of that stuff would not be entertaining for me, but that's fine. I mean, you have the ability as an adult to make your decisions. But 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, to have that thrust in them is not something that's appropriate. And also Manny just mentioned they try to whatever they can use a cudgel against me just because I'm a target. That's fine. I do kind of chuckle, and I mentioned it yesterday. Whatever something happens in Florida, it could have nothing remotely to do with me. If they could try to make it better, they put my picture up there. Florida does this. They did a thing. There was a legislator that filed a bill that the media, didn't like, and I said it's not something I support. Purportedly, that bloggers would need to register with the state under certain circumstances. So they'd be reporting on this, and they'd have my picture on there when this is not a bill that I've advocated for. It's not a concept I support. I don't support, but yet they do it because they get more clicks if they can rope me into it. And that's just kind of the way it is. Okay, we have Tia Bess. Come on up.
Just a minute. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for keeping our schools safe and keeping our children safe as well. Let's give another round of applause for Governor DeSantis. So today I stand here as a mother, a wife, a patriot, and a concerned citizen. For years I was a lifelong Democrat, but I changed my political affiliation in wake of the COVID pandemic. When my son was 8 years old, at the time, he was actually 5 at the time. Right now he's 8. My son's school required him to wear a mask, a face shield, and sit behind plexiglass. They told me that I either had to mask train my son or potty train him. At the time, he was on the autism spectrum. He was speech and hearing delayed and relied on reading lips. But how can you thrive when you can't see anyone's mouth? And the more I became involved with my son's education, the more I started to see behind the educational curtain. My son was just a dollar figure. He wasn't an individual. It wasn't until I said enough is enough and I stopped and I took a stand. I decided to join a group called Moms for Liberty. Now, Moms for Liberty has been receiving a lot of negative information because people think that they're just for Republicans. People look at groups like this and believe that they're just for white Americans. Well, last time I checked, we're all Americans. The more that I spoke out, the more that myself and my children became a target. We had a sitting school board member in Duval County refer to me as a token person, which is a racial slur. Does it make me a token because I want to stand up for my son's rights? Does it make me a token because my son has autism and he deserves to have the same chance as every other little boy and little girl that are born typically developing? My son deserves that right, and I decided to fight for him. But because I went to school board meetings and kept on speaking up, I was labeled not just a troublemaker, but also someone who was considered Uncle Tom. This is my country. My father fought in Korea, and he didn't fight for this type of America. One true America. The color of my skin does not determine the amount of my parental involvement. As a Mom for Liberty, we don't co-parent with the government. Mother knows best, and we all know that saying. They did not say government knows best. They did not say school boards know best. They said mother knows best. I'm going to tell you a tale of 2 counties. See, we had to flee, and we are technically political refugees in our own county. I don't know, to think about it in America, right? We were being persecuted in our county for our beliefs, for standing up for the truth. And at the end of the day, we have to save the children. It's all about the children. They are our future. They are depending on us to stand up right here and right now. And when the history books are rewritten, what side will you be on? The books that I have here are very interesting. My daughter actually went into the school's library, because we changed counties. My daughter went inside the school library, and she found the book called A Court of Mist and Fury. She took a picture of it. She sent it to me with the school's barcode and my daughter's hand, and I'm sure I know what my daughter's hand looks like. It was not photoshopped. And we had a school board member tell us that this was misinformation. Well, I'm tired of that word, misinformation. It's called the truth. I have two things in my hand. I have a hustler. Sorry, that's my mom. Hi, Mom. I have two things in my hand. I have A Court of Mist and Fury. I have my daughter holding the magazine as well, the book, and I brought her with me. But I also have a Hustler magazine. You can't say that word. But what I want to show you is that neither one of these things that I hold in my hand is appropriate for a child under 18. When you go to a movie theater, you have to be 18 to watch a rated R movie, right? You have to be. That's my daughter clapping. When you buy an explicit CD, there's a warning on it. Where are the warning labels for these books? We all know that Grindr is an adult app for 18 and up. Why are books telling you how to upload pictures on Grindr? Inappropriate. We have to stand up and save our kids. So, as I stand here today, I have spoken to school board members. I stand fearless with my governor. I have a confession. Governor DeSantis, I didn't vote for you the first time. And I speak of this as a woman of color because we're taught that if you look like me, you have to vote Democrat. We're taught that in schools. We're taught that Republicans only care about the rich. Republicans are only white and well off. That's incorrect. That's misinformation if we're going to use that word in proper context. I must admit I was a little bit nervous at first, but I have to speak the truth. CRT does not belong in schools. It does not. And for myself, at first, I would watch the news and I said, what is CRT? I have kids. I have 3 kids. I have a farm. I have chickens, pigs, goats. I have a lot on my plate. But I had to do the research myself. Every American needs to do their own research. Don't just take the fake news and believe it. Do it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go buy these books yourself. We're not banning books. However, parents need to be aware of the information. We need more people in office, just like Governor DeSantis, that supports parental rights, that supports transparency in education. This is what America needs. Thank you very much.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Great job. Great job. Thanks so much, Tia. Okay, Julie, come on up.
Well, good morning. It's an honor to be here, and I have a heightened appreciation for the opportunity to speak in a setting where I don't believe my mic will be turned off. My name is Julie Gebhardt, and I'm a mother to 6, and I have been one of those parents making regular visits to the school board, which is just a block away from here in Hillsborough County. So 3 years ago, as a parent with 4 kids in public schools, I had my head in the sand. I just would have never believed it until I saw it. My 15-year-old daughter came home from school and asked me to buy a book for her English class. No one could have prepared me for the review that I found online. Quote, graphic detail is given about the incestuous rape of an 11-year-old. The book graphically discusses prostitution, incest, rape, pornography, pedophilia, nudity, bestiality, and sodomy, end quote. But it actually doesn't end there. There was more. But I don't want to say it here. After I read this review, as you can imagine, a million questions came into my mind. Like, who put this material in the schools, and why would they do that? I began to dig, and what I found was a profoundly deep cesspool of filth. Now I have a growing list just here in Hillsborough County with over 300 books, book titles, with over 10,000 volumes just here in Hillsborough County, and that's only my personal research. There's bound to be way more. Sadly, Florida school libraries are filled with pornographic landmines. The more I dug, the worse it got. Week after week, I found myself saying, I just found the worst book yet. But lo and behold, descriptive sadomasochistic sex in the book Identical by Ellen Hopkins was not actually the worst. Incidentally, we have over 400 of her books in our libraries, all with the same themes: glamorizing drugs, sex, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. Glamorized. Can it get worse than this? How about a detailed description, multiple detailed descriptions of exceedingly violent, incestuous sexual assault by a mother and her father who raped her in Push by Sapphire. We have 10 copies here in Hillsborough County. I probably don't need to mention Genderqueer. I think everyone's familiar with that book, but of course we have that here too. Oh, and a graphic novel. You won't believe this. It depicts a satanic orgy. That is in Sumner High School right here in Hillsborough County. Volumes 1 and 2. Finally, I end on the book titled This Book is Gay, which contains detailed instructions for oral sex and every other type. This book destigmatizes pedophilia in the chapter titled The Ins and Outs of Gay Sex. The book even contains 5 steps for using a sex hookup app, telling kids that, quote, the benefits are obvious, quick, easy, and uncomplicated sex, end quote. It is in a middle school library here in town. In fact, just 2 days ago, I learned that the appeal to my original book challenge went to a district-wide committee, and that committee had head media specialists, both head media specialists of Hillsborough County, and all kinds of school district leaders with titles here in Hillsborough County. That committee came to the same conclusion as the school committee, which was to keep This Book is Gay in the middle school. Clearly, we need a strong, fearless leader to take a stand against the ideologues and hold them accountable. We must have legislation without loopholes. There are some bad actors in our schools who will try to exploit every little loophole. And it is simply not fair to hastily slap on the book banner label. For heaven's sake, huge book retailers and public libraries everywhere are proactively filling end caps with these banned books, available to anyone. How ironic. It is simply a lie to say these books are being banned. Like every school in America is banning Playboy, right? Let's hope so. This is about discretion. Schools should not be able to approve harmful literature. This is educational malpractice. We saw in November the will of the people expressed in the landslide victory for our governor. I personally voted for him in large part because of his stand with parents against the indoctrination of our youth. We are now asking our legislators and our governor to continue to do all that they can to create a safe place for our kids to learn and to hold ideologues and bad actors accountable for their decisions. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for giving a megaphone to parents who have had their mics cut off. Thank you for fighting to protect children from school libraries that are filled with pornographic landmines. Thank you for maintaining common sense. Lastly, if it can't be printed in a newspaper, if it's illegal to hand to a child outside of school, if it can't be posted on social media, which ironically you'll be banned if you do, if it can't be shown on the news, and if it's blocked by the server from reaching the Department of Education because of the explicit content, it should not be offered to children. Thank you. And Governor DeSantis, the parents of Florida, thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Stacy Hahn, Hillsborough School Board.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. Governor DeSantis, thank you for giving me the time today to speak and also for highlighting these issues and for busting the myths today. So when I am a Hillsborough County School Board member, and when I watched the video today and I listened to Julie just now, and I hear about these books being in Hillsborough County Public Schools, It not only makes me sad for children and parents, but it makes me very angry as a parent and a school board member. Sexually explicit material has been something I've been fighting against for the past year, specifically, obviously, in our schools. Working with organizations like CCD Florida, Lee Cardin, working with Julie Gephardt, who comes to every school board meeting. Thank you, Julie. You have a family of your own. This takes time away from her family. Your passion is inspiring to me as a school board member. It is very difficult to be in the minority on a school board. As much as I fight, I have one vote. So that's, a lot of the times, that is why you see Hillsborough County on lists where these books can be found. I have been working with countless individuals in our community, and I've been speaking with parents all across Hillsborough County who are very concerned. Parents entrust schools with their children. They trust that we'll keep them safe. They trust that we'll teach them how to read and write and do math and understand science and be good citizens. And I work very hard to do that each and every day. What they don't want is their children to be exposed, and they certainly don't expect them to be exposed to pornographic material and highly sexualized books. They don't want their children sexualized when they go to school. So I can assure you that I will continue to fight the fight, ensure that students go to school and they're kept safe, and I'll continue to work with organizations, families across Hillsborough County, across this country, and hold this district and the superintendent accountable when we do find these materials in our schools. They're not in high schools and just middle schools. We have K-8 schools where these books are in those libraries. And I often ask our district superintendent and staff, how are you ensuring that a first grader isn't pulling these books off the shelves in a K-8 library? And I don't get a very clear answer. There is no safeguard in place. That's concerning. As a parent and a school board member, I do want to thank the governor today for being here, for protecting children, for protecting parental rights. I also want to thank him because I'm so proud to say I live in Florida. I'm proud to live in a free state that is a beacon of freedom for states across this country. So I just want to thank you all again for being here, for putting up the fight, for working together to protect our children. And I promise you, I will continue to do the very same thing from the dais as a Hillsborough County School Board member each and every day. Thank you again, Governor DeSantis.
Thank you. And I think the main issue is what both the last few speakers have pointed out, how inappropriate it is to be having this. Kids should not be exposed. Parents don't want that to happen. But, it's also an opportunity cost with the school. Every minute you spend focusing on some of this pornographic stuff, that's less time you're spending on doing the things that really matter to our kids in terms of them getting the education they need and math and reading and all these other things. And so it's the only way you make that decision, in my judgment, is if you're putting your own agenda ahead of the well-being of the students. And that's what we see too often. Well, these issues are important. Probably the belly of the beast, or one of them, has been down in Broward County. And we had a shakeup on that school board, and basically it was a response to the Parkland massacre when I became governor, We removed the sheriff of Broward County, and then we started a statewide grand jury looking into Broward and other districts about their school security practices. The report ended up finally coming out. It's like they really worked to delay it, recommended the suspension of, I think, 4 or 5 Broward school board members, and so we would do that. We were able to get really a reform board in there for the first time in a long time. Now they've had elections, so it's shaken back up a little bit, but Tori Alston has been there really fighting the fight in territory that sometimes is difficult. Although I would say we did a lot better in Broward than Republicans used to do, so maybe the times there are changing. So Tori, come on up.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Governor. I am honored to join you for this conversation. I am honored to stand with you today as we clearly correct many of the false narratives that I've heard around the state and around the country, and particularly down in South Florida. As a former Broward County Commissioner and former chair of the Broward School Board, and still serving on the board, Governor, thank you. I know your heart, Governor. I've seen your bold vision, having worked under your leadership in state government. In Broward Public Schools, I too have seen inappropriate material in our classrooms, and I'm proud that we removed graphic material that no one in elementary or middle school should have been exposed to. As a father of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and just like other parents, we know what's best for our children, and we trust our kids, and we must continue to empower our parents. Let me be clear. The narrative also on, quote, book bans on Black history or key Black leaders in our public schools is completely false. In Broward schools, the nation's 6th largest school district, Governor, it's completely false. And I know personally. As an African-American leader in South Florida, I have been very clear. This administration supports African-American history, as we know that actual African-American history is a significant part of American history. This administration supports Black history, women's history, Hispanic heritage, along with so many other key parts of our country's rich history. As one of several conservatives on the Broward School Board, I can attest, Governor, and you're right, that the law was passed back in the mid-1990s mandating African-American history instruction in all school districts, and it is alive and well. In Broward County Public Schools, we are 100% compliant. I know the governor and this entire administration supports following state law, and I will continue to work with my colleagues down in Big Blue Broward, but we've cracked it a little bit, Governor, to ensure that we do our part. Governor, you can count on us down in Broward. As I close, Governor, thank you for again being very clear that sexual and graphic material has no place in our classrooms. Thank you for your boldness and leadership, clearly outlining that inappropriate material has no place for a 1st grader or a 6th grader. And thank you, Governor, for correcting this narrative on many of the, quote, book ban myths that we've heard all across the state. Governor, I am always proud to stand with you, and thank you, sir, for your leadership.
All right, great job. Thank you. Okay, Glenn Gilzine, Central Florida Urban League.
All right. So the challenge is when you go last, everybody takes your talking points. Everybody takes everything, right? I want to thank the governor, thank the commissioner for your outstanding leadership. But I got to start off with this one quick quote. There comes a time when we must take a position that is neither safe or popular. But we must take this because one's conscience says that it's the right thing to do. Those were words from Dr. Martin Luther King. I stand here as an advocate for low-income Black kids. Our community is in dire need of the right type of intervention. We need to focus back on the basics: reading, writing, math. Here are the facts. Yeah, that's true. Here are the facts. I come from Orange County, Central Florida. Over 65% of black kids can't read on grade levels in grade 9 through 12. That number is even worse, where 80% of black kids can't do math on grade levels. The achievement gap is so wide it's roughly 30% between black and white kids. Where's the march? Where's the protest? Where's the outrage for the facts, other than the fact that we're focusing on false narratives and false media? I work for a nonprofit organization that relies on donations. I wrote an op-ed standing up and stating the truth, and I tell you, I had donors call and cancel my donations. I had people call the National Urban League to get me fired. I've even received a letter in the mail that says my days are numbered, right? But you know what? I stand here because I'm doing what's right. We're here because we're doing what's right. So yes, I stand with our governor as he makes record investments, and also our commissioner, as he makes record investments to close the achievement gap between black and white kids. Yes, I stand here with our governor as he fights for education freedom for all students, making sure that all kids get access to school choice and all the other items as needed. So let's do what's right. Let's not get caught up in the fake narratives and the headlines. Let's focus on the children, and let's focus on the facts. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. Thank you, Commissioner.
Good job, man. Thank you. Well, I just say, I think we've had an excellent group of speakers today. I think it's all been very persuasive and really, I think, invigorating and unifying to say that we've got a lot of work to do. Let's do the basics. Let's get the basics right in our schools and make sure that our kids are able to thrive, and let's not allow the type of stuff that you saw on that screen before we started this press conference. And I think if we had the entire state of Florida somehow either sitting in here or watching that, I don't think there'd be very many people who, honest to goodness, believes that what was up there is appropriate for our schools. So I said we just started the legislative session yesterday. We were able to, we've got big opportunities ahead of us. We have, we're in kind of an enviable situation as a state. I mean, we're the fastest growing state, #1 in net in-migration, #1 for education freedom, #1 for new business formations, #1 for economic growth amongst large states, second lowest tax burden, second lowest debt burden, big surplus, on and on and on it goes. And honestly, we could just rest on our laurels if we really wanted to, but that's just not the right thing to do. So we're going full speed ahead. We've got great stuff on the horizon over the next few months. And as I said yesterday, you ain't seen nothing yet. Well, I don't think that that's off the table. I mean, I think Cord Bird, the Secretary of State, has been running this to ground. If there's action on behalf of somebody, I think we would want to take it. Look, the whole idea of ERIC, if it worked well, could be good. I mean, for example, you have someone that votes in Hillsborough County that also has a place in New York. If you have ERIC, you can figure out pretty easily if they've also voted in New York. So that was why we joined it, because we didn't want to see double voting. In Florida, we're a transient state. People come and go. We obviously attract a lot of migration. So there was reasons why we wanted to do it. But the way they're using that data has been very, very concerning, and not just violating the confidences and the privacy, but using it for partisan purposes. And so it was recommended to me that we withdraw from it. I think that was the right decision, but that does not mean there will not be follow-up actions on this matter. Yes, sir. Sure.
We did speak with some teachers in Manatee County who, at the time, this was about a month ago, decided to remove all like their classroom libraries. They said the reason was that it would take a long time to vet each one and have a media specialist or a librarian
Well, so here's the thing. The curriculum transparency law was signed last spring, right? So this is not anything new. We've empowered parents. I did press conferences saying that we want to do that. So this was not anything that should have waited this long, but just think about it. Okay, if you have books in a classroom and maybe it's like a middle school thing and you have the life of George Washington, does that really take a thorough review of that? No. You have the life of Frederick Douglass. Does that really? No, it doesn't. Okay, so I think some of this that was being done, and I don't necessarily know about Manatee, but I can tell you in Duval what they were doing, it was intentionally trying to create friction and trying to create issues to then act like something was wrong in the state of Florida. And that stuff is not something that's going to take a rocket science to figure out, shouldn't be in the schools. And if you are familiar with Florida law, because one of the things they were saying to try to make a narrative about the African American history was, oh, Stop Woke Act, you can't discuss racism. So if someone had that is totally false. And in fact, the Stop Woke Act said you must discuss discrimination. And so that knocks out a lot of those objections right off the bat were some of the ones they were trying to say. So you really don't have a lot there other than things that are just patently inappropriate, and that's just kind of the nature of it. But most schools didn't have an issue with this because they saw that the transparency was in effect, and they made sure that they were in order. And a lot of them, to be fair to them, because I know, like some of the stuff in Hillsborough is concerning, there's no question about it, but the vast majority of the school districts in Florida are not ordering those books. That's a good thing that they're not trying to do that. So we're focusing on some of the problems, and we need to rectify those. But we should also just point out that the vast majority of school districts have been doing it right, and they've been sensitive to what's appropriate and not appropriate, and I think the parents are pleased in many parts of the state. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Sarah from Telemundo. Talking about the risk of indoctrination, I don't know if you know, but the Cuban ambassador was here in Tampa, and she met with one of the members of the school board here. I was wondering what you think about it, and if you think that there's a risk that the communist government is trying to indoctrinate our kids.
I think the Cuban regime has been a crime against humanity. I think that they extinguished people's liberties and freedom on the island of Cuba. I think that the folks that have fled that regime, their descendants, particularly in southern Florida, because of that experience, have represented the beating heart of freedom in this state, because they understand that it could all be taken away. And so to wheel in a Cuban ambassador who's an ambassador from a corrupt totalitarian regime and acting like we have anything to benefit in Florida from that, no thank you. I think they should go back to Cuba where they belong.
Governor, you tweeted yesterday about Novak Djokovic. I'm a huge tennis fan. I'm going to the Miami Open. I'd love to have a chance to see Djokovic, but he did get deported from Australia after getting all of the different permissions that he requested. If he did somehow chance it and try to come to Florida by boat to participate in the Miami Open, first of all, have you been in communication with his team about the possibility of doing this? And secondly, do you have the authority to grant him basically safe passage into Florida?
So we've actually been working on this for many, many weeks. So Novak Djokovic, I think as you guys know, number one tennis player, one of the best ever. He is being discriminated against because he didn't take the mRNA COVID jab. And he never wanted to do it from the beginning. And you know what? There were people in Florida who never wanted to do it, and we fought for your right to make that choice without losing your job or having this stuff. And so not only has he not wanted to take it, we now have the data to show these booster shots aren't preventing you from getting infected. People get infected anyways. And so, it's like, okay, now you have this rule, and we're one of the only countries in the world that has this rule that you have to show shot records to come in as a foreign visitor on an airplane. Never mind, Djokovic has already had COVID. There's something called natural immunity, which the CDC didn't want to recognize, but we all know is a fact of life. And so he poses zero risk to the United States, zero risk to the state of Florida, and zero risk to Miami. So he should be allowed to compete. Now, I would run a boat from the Bahamas here for him. I would do that 100%. But I think his people are looking at it, and I'm not sure that's the way they want to come into the country, which I understand. I think it'd be a great moment, but nevertheless. So, but we've looked at the rules, and this is all executive fiat. Congress never passed any of this. They wanted to take your job if you didn't get the shot. Congress never passed that. That was executive fiat by the Biden administration. That's not the way this country is supposed to be governed. But so that's what the rules are of what they laid down. So we think that coming by boat may be okay, even under Biden's existing framework. So I've written a letter saying, let him come in. But if you're not letting him come in by plane, at least confirm to us, not really because I care, but I think his camp wants to know, that he could come by boat and it would not be in violation of anything that you've done. And so we'll wait on a response on that. But at the end of the day, how unscientific is it to impose this ridiculous mandate? And the thing is, the state of Florida, we thrive off a lot of the foreign visitors and the tourists. This has put a crimp into that, because there's people on a matter of principle that don't want to have to show their shot records either way. And I get invited to visit foreign countries all the time, and we haven't done it since COVID, because the first question I ask is, are they going to require us to test or show papers or anything like that? I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. But it is wrong to discriminate against somebody based on the choice they've made regarding this. It was wrong when the shots first came out and everyone said that they were going to work and end COVID. It was wrong then, and we said that then. We actually banned vaccine passports in early 2021 in Florida. We were the first state to do that, because you have people, I had a lot of people that were just between 18 and 45, not at high risk. Many of them have had COVID, and they're telling me, I don't want to do this. But yet, if I don't do it, if they start having passports, I can't go to a movie theater or a game? And that's what they wanted. That was the vision, Fauci's vision, to basically marginalize people who didn't bend the knee. And so we rejected that. But it is wrong to discriminate against people on this basis, and it's especially wrong today, after we've been through this for a couple years, and after we've seen massive waves occur even amongst people that had gotten shots and boosters. And so let's just get real here. It's wrong to discriminate, period, on this basis. But how unscientific is it to cling to this particular mandate when we know that people are getting infected and people are spreading it, regardless of the booster shot? So I hope he's able to play. I hope that the president will, not necessarily even grant him special. I think what he should do is just repeal the rule. It's not a good rule, and it's not something that makes sense. And we're one of only a handful of countries that do it. But I would just reflect on this. The fact that they're still clinging to the fact that they were in court down in Miami a month or two ago, arguing for the reinstatement of the air travel mask mandate. They want that reinstated. They were arguing for that. The fact that they're still trying to do that, what I think that could tell you is, if it wasn't for Florida standing up and saying no, they would have won on those issues and so many more issues. We would be in a situation where you would have to be showing these papers to go to a different state or all these other things. We would basically be in a biomedical security state. And Florida was the impenetrable roadblock to the Faucian vision that they had for this country. And so it's not just, I had to lead the charge, but we had a lot of Floridians who took pride in us bucking these elites and us saying, not on our watch. Okay, thanks everybody.